Matter changes behavior when watched. Not in the cheap internet comment section way, not in the stare at your rent and it disappears way, because if that worked, economists would be priests and landlords would fear eye contact. No, this is stranger. In the most famous experiment in quantum physics, tiny particles can behave like waves until the experiment is arranged to find out which path they took. Then the pattern changes. The setup of the measurement matters. And for a moment, just a moment, it feels like the universe is whispering, "You do not understand reality as well as you think you do." 2,000 years ago, Jesus spoke constantly about unseen realities, kingdoms hidden like yeast in dough, treasure buried in fields, forces invisible but decisive. And one of the Bible's most famous lines defines faith as confidence in what is not yet seen. That verse is Hebrews 11:1. Now, let's be careful. Quantum mechanics is not a shortcut to mystical nonsense. But if we use it honestly, it does crack open a door. Tonight, we walk through it. Scene 2. Set the stage. Imagine this. You fire waves at a wall with two narrow openings. What happens on the screen behind it? If you've ever thrown two stones into a pond, you already know. Waves spread. Waves overlap. Waves reinforce each other in some places and cancel in others. So on the screen, you get a striped pattern, bright, dark, bright, dark. That's interference. That's classic wave behavior. Thomas Young used this logic in the early 1800s to help show that light behaves like a wave. Two slits, overlapping wavefronts, interference. So far, so normal. But then physics did what physics does best. It took a simple idea and made it terrifying. Scene 3. Enter the double-slit mystery. Scientists repeated the two-slit setup, but instead of water waves, they used particles, light particles, electrons, later even larger quantum objects in related experiments. Now your common sense says particles should go through one slit or the other, like tiny bullets, so the screen should show two clumps. Instead, when both paths are open and there is no path detection, the result is an interference pattern, as if each particle is described by a wave-like spread of possibilities, not a tiny marble with one simple root. And here's where the floor gives way beneath your feet. Scientists have sent electrons one by one, one by one. Each electron lands as a single dot. But after many detections, the dots build up into an interference pattern. Read that again with your soul. One particle at a time, one dot at a time, yet together they form a pattern that looks like wave interference. Quantum mechanics looks at your intuition, smiles politely, and sets it on fire. Scene 4. Make it visual. At first, the screen looks random. Scattered blips, like static, like a printer having a nervous breakdown. Then more dots arrive, and more, and now a hidden order emerges. A pattern was there in the probabilities before your eyes could see it in the data. That is already a sermon. Sometimes reality is structured before it is visible. Sometimes what looks random at the beginning becomes intelligible only with accumulation, patience, and the right frame. A farmer sees dirt, a prophet sees harvest, a physicist sees noise, and then, suddenly, fringes. Now comes the famous twist. What if we try to determine which slit the particle went through? If the experiment is arranged to reveal which way information, the interference pattern disappears. Instead of the wave-like striped pattern, you get behavior consistent with path-resolved particle detection. In plain English, changing the measurement arrangement changes the result. And this is where people say, see, consciousness changes reality. Slow down, Captain Crystal. That is not what the experiment proves. Modern quantum mechanics does not require a human mind staring dramatically over a lab bench like a wizard with a PhD. The key issue is the measurement interaction itself. The system couples to an apparatus or environment. Information becomes available, and that changes the evolution and the observed pattern. So, no, double-slit does not prove mind over matter in the pop mystic sense, but it does prove something unsettling. At the quantum level, measurement is not an afterthought. Measurement is not a passive glance. It is part of the physical story. Scene 6. What it does not mean. Let's clean the table. The double-slit experiment does not mean your thoughts can override physics. Human attention creates the universe like a game engine. Quantum mechanics proves every mystical claim with a crystal logo. You can manifest a Ferrari by glaring at a parking lot. If that last one were true, half of social media would be driving spaceships by now. Quantum mechanics is subtle, mathematical, brutally precise. What it shows is this: quantum systems are described probabilistically, and the way you measure them affects what outcomes are available and what pattern you observe. That is weird enough. You do not need to decorate it with nonsense. And this is where many people ruin both science and spirituality, by forcing one to say what it never said. Now, once we strip away the nonsense, what remains? Something profound. The visible layer is not the whole story. Before detection, the system is described in terms that don't fit ordinary everyday categories. The math tracks possibilities, amplitudes, relationships, things that are not directly visible like rocks and chairs. Meaning, the world we see may rest on a deeper layer we do not see directly. Not fantasy, not proof of every spiritual claim, just this: the visible layer is not the full explanatory layer. And that idea should not be foreign to a Christian audience. Jesus taught this constantly: a seed underground, leaven in dough, roots before fruit, spirit before manifestation. So when physics tells us reality can't always be reduced to naive surface appearances, the Christian does not need to panic. The Christian can say, of course, the visible has never exhausted the real. Now let's build the bridge, carefully. The Bible does not teach quantum mechanics, and the double-slit experiment does not prove Christianity. Say that clearly. Say it twice if needed. Pause. But there is a philosophical resonance here worth noticing. Hebrews 11:1 describes faith as assurance, confidence, regarding what is hoped for and not yet seen. The biblical point is not that faith is fantasy. It is that unseen realities can have genuine weight before they become visible in ordinary experience. And that's where double-slit becomes useful as a metaphor. Not a proof, a metaphor. Because in the experiment, the final visible pattern is shaped by underlying realities you can't describe with simple surface-level intuition alone. Hidden structure shows up in outcomes. Christian faith makes a larger claim: that the deepest layer of reality is not chaos, not blind absurdity, but meaning anchored in God. Science can map mechanisms. Faith asks what mechanisms cannot finally settle: why there is order, why truth is intelligible, why reason can reach reality at all, why the unseen can govern the seen without being imaginary. And here is where some viewers get nervous, because once you admit the visible world may not be the whole story, you have to face a fork in the road. Either the unseen is meaningless machinery, or it is meaningful depth. Physics alone does not force that choice, but it does make the shallowest version of materialism feel a lot less smug. Here's the rabbit hole. At the smallest scales, reality resists our ordinary categories. Particles are not just little billiard balls. Measurement is not just peaking. The experimental arrangement matters. Probabilities are not mere ignorance in the classical sense. They're built into the formalism of quantum theory. And that means the universe is not obligated to feel intuitive to creatures who evolved to throw spears and pay taxes. You were built to survive on the savannah, not to intuit wave functions. So, yes, the world is stranger than your instincts, but stranger does not mean irrational. It means deeper. That's where science and faith can stop fighting like jealous cousins. Science says there is more here than meets the eye. Faith says, I know, live accordingly. Science says measurement changes what is revealed. Faith says alignment changes what takes shape in your life. Now be careful again. Those are not identical claims. One is physics, one is theology and spiritual formation. But they rhyme, and sometimes a rhyme is enough to wake a sleeping mind. So what did we learn? Not that scientists proved magic, not that consciousness is a cheat code, not that every quantum meme deserves parole. We learned something better. We learned that reality is deeper than appearance. We learned that measurement
is not passive at the quantum scale. We learned that what is unseen can govern what is seen. And once you truly grasp that, the biblical language of faith stops sounding childish. It starts sounding structurally serious. Because faith in Scripture is not pretending. It is acting in trust toward a reality not yet fully visible. A farmer does it with seed. A believer does it with prayer. A scientist does it with equations before the apparatus confirms the pattern. Different domains, different rules, but the same humbling lesson. The eye is not the measure of all that is real. If this opened your mind, the next question is unavoidable. If the visible world is not the whole story, what exactly is the invisible realm? Not fantasy, not superstition, but the hidden structures, spiritual, philosophical, and physical, that shape what becomes visible. That's the next video, Invisible Realm. If you want that one, subscribe, hit like, and drop this in the comments. There's more than meets the eye, and I'll see you in the next one.